All right, welcome back to the Stages podcast. I'm Lance Armstrong with my co-host JB Hager.
Yep,
talking about the Tour of Flanders. Ended up being an exciting race, but before we get to the race itself, I just wanted to touch on one thing right quick. We've talked about this a couple of times in the season preview and other things. I was scheduled to attend this race in person as a guest of Walter, the race owner. And as I said in my statement last week, I had a family matter come up that was serious enough that I needed to stay here. And Walter was such a gentleman about it. The message from him, which is the message that I sort of led to my decision, was family first. And so
I'm sure that was a difficult phone call.
Yeah. It was, because there was so much when he decided to invite me as his guest and asked me to speak at the first gala that they had there at the Flanders Institute of Business. He got a lot of criticism from a few people. I think I said that right, a lot from a few, but he also had a lot of support. So it was a not an easy decision for him to make, to invite me, and so I felt I was really torn between trying to honor the commitment and be true to him, but at the end of the day, this issue that my family's dealing with was way more important. So we didn't go. We sat around, the cabana out back and watched it on Fubo, which was,
they did a great job with the coverage.
I've never watched a bike race on this Fubo thing. I didn't even know what that was, or that existed. And
it's Fubo.tv. If anyone's interested in watching some of the upcoming races, so you can kind of share and with us, and that it's pretty impressive on a live stream on your computer. But if you have a newer generation Apple TV or anything like that, it syncs with that. So we watched it like normal television, and it was pretty impressive.
Yeah, no, I got to give it to him. We did watch it on a normal television, which was cool, as opposed to your phone or your laptop. But look, to me, the main headline, and we'll get into this later on in the show, was so many, to me, like, people look at cycling or think about cycling and they think it's an individual sport. You saw Nicky Terpstra, congratulations to him. He came across the line all alone. For the average person, that looks like, the guy winning the New York City Marathon, where he's coming across all alone. But when you get to know the sport, and many of you listening do know the sport, I mean, if there was ever a day where it was so overwhelmingly on display, the level of teamwork from Quick Step, I mean, this is a team game, and today was, Quick Step, it was teamwork 101 today.
It is easy, especially when you talk about the tough one-day classics, to think an individual can just do whatever they want.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that more so at the end.
Right, and just one more thing, sorry, but just compare and contrast to Peter Sagan, the overwhelming favorite to win this Tour of Flanders, without a team.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we can get into and break down later on.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you, just to start preparing, what do you do moving forward? Whether we know what Quick Step's going to do, but what do you do for the rest of the guys? So we'll get into that in a little bit.
What does Peter Sagan do?
Yeah, save it for the end.
Okay.
Save that for the end.
I'm going to save it. JB, ask me later.
Because I want to ask you about that, but I want to go. It's very interesting, and that's the whole point of this: is sitting down with Lance while a race is happening, and the things that you see that, as a race fan, having watched it for years, you don't notice. Mm-hmm. There's so many things today. So let's talk about some of the things that you broke down for me that, as an average fan, I wouldn't have even brought it to my attention whatsoever. One of the first things you brought up that really caught my ear is you pointed out all the fans, whenever they would get to a cobbled section, you pointed out how many fans are holding wheel sets.
Yep.
And I say friends, they're friends and family and helpers of the team.
Yeah, they could be anybody associated with the team. It could be, it could be the bus driver. It could be the neighbor of where their service course is, where their headquarters is. But the point of this that I'm trying to make is that when you have a cobbled race and the roads are that narrow and the field is strung out, obviously in most races, if a rider needs a wheel change, he gets it from the team car. But when these cars, when the roads again are that narrow, they're so far behind that it would take minutes, which is
And
means
I
the race
even
is
noticed
over.
on a couple of them, correct me if I'm wrong, the team cars would go around the old cobble climb. They wouldn't even go up the same section.
Some of them they're probably not allowed to go on, just because they are so narrow. And if there's that great old photo of Jesper Skibby getting run over by that old BMW on one of those cobbled climbs and just completely tacoing his wheels. But these, so it's interesting. I mean, you'll find a fan of the team or one of the staff members at the office that they'll give them a jersey. They'll stand there with a front and a rear wheel. They'll stand there with some bottles, maybe some gels, and just in case.
Yeah, and
right?
sure enough, we saw a rider with a mechanical and somebody comes running from the crowd with a wheel set. That's cool. I had never noticed that before. You were also very quick to point out the difference between how some of the riders were dressed versus others. Some were loaded down, leg warmers, jackets, and you're talking about a 6-hour day starting out wet. And some are wearing nothing.
I know. Well, it's like a lot of things in life. I mean, certain people run hot, some people run cold, and so or you might have somebody from Russia and you might have somebody from Colombia. So those obviously they're used to different climates growing up. They can handle cold temperatures.
By the way, it was in the mid 40s.
Yeah, started
most of the race.
For the second classic in a row, we started in the cold rain and ended up with dry sunshine. So again, for the riders, when they get that message through their earpiece that it's sunny at the finish, buddy, that's on a long, cold, wet day. That's like Christmas.
If you're a person that doesn't handle the cold well, and for 6 hours wearing those leg warmers that have been, wet soaked half the day, and a jacket and the heavier gloves, and that's got to take a toll on you to a degree.
Look, and some of these guys start the race knowing that they're only going to ride 150, 200 kilometers. So they might start like that, thinking, shit, I'm going to get dropped, and I'll just
might as well stay comfortable.
I'm going to pull out anyways, so I may as well stay comfortable. And then lo and behold, there was one of the final breakaways. It was two guys. One guy literally had everything on in his closet, it seemed like, and the other dude had no arm warmers, no leg warmers, no gloves, no nothing. And so, I suspect he expected to be there, and the other guy was like, I'm just going to ride for 4 hours and get out of here.
And I think you said earlier that this is a newer thing with Flanders and maybe one of the only races that does it, but repeating some of these cobbled sections. So the fans got to see him come by more than, one fleeting moment, which I think is great.
It's amazing. And that's what Wild Tour has done. I mean, for those of you who were able to watch it on TV, he's really revolutionized and modernized the race. I'm sure that there are people that do not like it. That there are people that don't like that you don't do the Gerhardsberg, the Muir to Gerhardsberg and the Bosberg and then finish. But what he did is he came in and he said, okay, he probably looked at previous editions, realized that the crowds on the old Quaremont, which is the most iconic climb in the race, were the biggest. And he said, well, why wouldn't we go do it 3 times and build grandstands and beer gardens and big screen TVs? And that's exactly what he did. And so it's a modern version of a race that's been around, since 1913, so 105 years. And but you can't argue with the way he's done it. The crowds were massive, the energy was massive, and he's got a vision for cycling that I think many could and should emulate.
Well, that makes sense to me. If you're a fan and you can go out near one of these historic climbs and really essentially be in a beer garden watching it on big screens all day, right? And then when they're coming by, you rush to the road. It's not like they're all waiting by the road all day.
No, they're not, especially in the cold rain.
Right?
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Another thing I would have never noticed had you not pointed out is how different some sections of the roads are. Everyone talks about the cobbles, especially in Flanders, but the concrete roads and the split in the middle. Right.
We saw a big crash.
Do your best to describe that
it's
to
very
people.
Folks, you kind of have to have been there, but in America especially, we build roads primarily with asphalt, right? Maybe if you're out in the country, it's like a chip seal. These roads in Flanders and in that part of Belgium are the roads. The actual pavement is concrete. So they've been around a long time, and they're nice. They're smooth. The only problem is that a lot of the time between the two, imagine that they essentially build two concrete lanes that come together, but they don't perfectly come together. So in the middle of the road, if you're driving a car, you would never notice this.
It's probably so they can flex with temperatures like a bridge, right?
Maybe. I'm not a road builder, but and if you're just riding your bike alone, you would never notice it either. You only notice it when you're in a race where the roads are closed and you're in the middle of the road. I mean, it's about a 1 or 2 inch gap sometimes. And so riders, of course, the last thing you want to do is get a front wheel in a 1 inch gap going 30 miles an hour. You don't want to do that. So what they end up doing is hopping over it back and forth, if you're in the middle of the peloton. And of course, when you're doing that, everybody around you is trying to get away from you. I suspect that, the one pile up with a couple hours to go, I suspect that's what happened, because it happened right in the middle of the group. Somebody either got stuck in that crack or was bouncing around to not get stuck. And that's when it was raining, it was wet, and then it was just, like dominoes.
And if you didn't get to see it this morning, the one dude that had what looked like a pretty slow tumble fell over to the side into the grass and mud, and then you realize what was catching him before he went over the edge.
Yeah, that guy right at the bottom of the old Quermont, the guy on EF Drapac, I don't know where he's from, but it reminded me of this crash. We may see images later that rivals the one from the Tour a couple of years ago when Johnny Hogerland, for you cycling fans, when Johnny Hogerland, that car tried to come around, the moron driving this car and nudged him, and he goes flying into the barbed wire. I mean, it was like a shark bite. I mean, it was nuts. And so this poor guy had the bad luck or the misfortune of crashing. And then when he's rolling off the road, the thing that stopped him was a bunch of barbed wire.
The guy it looked like pure agony. Just think about it. You're suffering, you're bunched up, you're hitting cobbles and mud, and then you roll into some barbed wire.
Yeah.
Not many sports that do that.
No.
Involve barbed wire.
Well, this is such an easy game.
The other thing I observe a lot of that I would love to have you describe, because so many of the riders, they're trying to be aggressive up these cobble hills that can be as steep as 20% on parts of it. And they look like they're just want to stand up so bad.
Yep.
And each time they stand up, it's like, before you know it, within 2 seconds, their butt's right back on the saddle.
Yep.
It must just be that hard to climb standing up.
When it's that steep and when they're wet, and even today, you would have noticed, even when the rain stopped, the cobblestones stay slick. They don't. It takes a few hours of real sunshine to dry them out. So if they're,
it's is it kind of like a low water crossing? How it just stays kind of.
It's not that slippery. It's not. There's not moss on them.
Yeah.
But they're just slippery, so you cannot stand up. And so the guys have to stay in the saddle, which then just goes to this next layer of certain riders are better in the saddle than others. And so, the tendency, yes, especially to if you're getting dropped or to try to accelerate, is to stand up to go faster. You just can't. You got to stay. You got to sit right in it. And again, when it's steep, if it's 20% and the cobbles are that rough and they're moist, you have to sit down. I mean, we saw today. There were riders walking. They were walking. I mean, I was like, I don't know about this look for cycling. But if a guy falls in front of you or gets unclipped or drops a chain, you just can't get going again when it's that steep. I mean,
one of the things that I asked Lance about earlier, obviously we didn't have a Belgian winner, but they represent well, right, on their home turf. I was like, when you're an amateur or a junior level rider, are they riding these same cobbles? Like, is it second nature to them?
If you're a young kid, well, first of all, the Belgians did not win the race individually, but a Belgian team won. So you had a Dutch rider from a Belgian team. I mean, talk about a bipolar fan, right? So they're going, oh my God, like a Dutch. I mean, that's like, Texas and Oklahoma. Like no, that's not cool. And you haven't had a Dutch winner in 32 years since Adrie van der Poel. But yes, as a young rider, they know if you're from that area. I mean, if you're from the French-speaking part of Belgium, Wallonia, you're not riding the old Quermont. But if you grow up in Flanders, those are your roads. Those local boys, they know every stone on that climb. That's what they call a home field advantage.
Right. Right. Being a Texan, a home field advantage might be heat. It's kind of like that for them.
I hate the heat. I think that's because I'm old and I'm just over it.
We learned a cool story about one of the climbs. I'll let you share it. The Paterberg climb.
Yeah. So when I've never taken the time to do this, but as we were watching, I was just kind of reading through the Wikipedia page for Tour of Flanders, and as you get down to the bottom, they start to go into the different climbs, and these are all really iconic climbs. And there's actually Wikipedia pages dedicated to each of these climbs. So you can go look at the history of the climb, the inspiration of the name of the climb. And so I was the last climb of the day is the Patersberg, which, arguably the last climb of the day is the most important. So I was like, I should probably check that out. Well, it turns out this hill and road was a dirt road until 1986. And this is according to Wikipedia, which, if it's true, is fucking amazing. So it was, so it's been included in the Tour of Flanders every year since its first inclusion in 86. So before 1986, it was a dirt road. And at that point in 1986, a local farmer paved the road in cobblestones because he wanted the Tour of Flanders to go by his house. Now that is...
He built, probably individually. Your friends just don't exactly get involved with that.
I mean, it's 400 meters long.
Wow.
I mean, we've talked about, and everybody really knows how passionate Belgians are for cycling. I don't know the farmer, his name or who the hell he was, but that's some passion. I want this race to come by my house so bad that I am going to, by myself, pave 400 meters with cobblestones so the race can come over here. That's awesome. Amazing.
I think that's a testament to their love of it, right?
Yeah. What's the dude's name? Maybe his name is Potter. Maybe he's Potter from the Paterberg. The Burg always means a hill. So when they say the Burgs, that means the hills. So the name before it is, derived.
Old farmer potters out there flipping stones again.
Who knows? Yeah, you got the Kreuzberg, the Molenberg, the Koppenberg, the Tyenberg, the Berg de Steen, the Leberg, the Valkenberg. So you say that's the Berg means the hill, the climb.
Well, the farmer built a road just to have. I hope he lived to see the day. I hope it's not it was this old guy that passed away before. As soon as he did
it, they had it the first year, 1986. So he had, unless he died like on the last stone. That would suck.
It could be. Another observation today, again, the Fubo TV coverage was impressive. I mean,
I got footage. The only thing I will say, and maybe it was just, I'm assuming that they pull that stream from the international feed, which the Tour of Flanders sends out. I just want to, first of all, give a shout out to the women that also did the women's Tour of Flanders today, hours and hours and hours before the men. When the last 30 minutes of the women's race is at a point in time in the men's race when it's not that exciting.
It was right around 85K. It was not a real big moment.
We could split the screen and show the women's race and show the women's winner. We could, or we could just dedicate the entire screen to the women's race. I think we're at that point in cycling and in women's cycling that absolutely has to happen. I mean, especially if they're hours and hours and hours ahead, we're not going to miss anything in the men's race. And if we do,
they can always go back and roll.
You can show it.
Yeah.
So give the ladies their due and show half hour or whatever at least.
They made a couple mentions of it when it was about 15K out.
Sure.
And I thought for sure they're going to show the last 10K, the last 5K of the women's, and we didn't get to see it.
Yep.
Which is a bummer. Good point. But they did, as far as coverage-wise, we were talking about it, was we've always seen the follow moto cameras and a helicopter. So it was either right in the action or really, really wide. And we're pretty sure they had some drones in there pretty close to the action.
On the Pottersburg, it either, there was something, you always know when it's being shot from the helicopter because you hear the helicopter. And this was a lot closer, but just dead silent. So maybe they either, in the NFL games, they have them on a wire or I've never seen live footage from a drone. I guess that's probably possible. But it looked great. I mean, for a sport that really needs to start thinking about its content and what that looks like to the viewer, a new viewer, an old viewer, or whatever. Well, that was a good look.
Even though it was a different look than we've seen, a little closer, a little tighter for an aerial, there's still many times we were like, give us the big aerial, because we couldn't tell what the gaps look like.
We talk every time we talk about a bike race, we talk about that front camera angle.
It's just I guess it's just a camera crew thing of being intuitive of when the fans want to see what that looks like.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, look,
it's deceiving.
When Nicky Terpstra caught that breakaway of 3 guys and went straight through them and started to just hammer from that front angle, you're like, oh, they're on him. It looks like they're on his wheel when. And then all of a sudden you get a little more perspective or a higher perspective, and you're like, oh, no, he's riding away. So it's funny.
Very, very deceiving. Now let's talk about the win. If you want to describe how it went down, why it happened, and then we'll talk about the team aspect.
Yeah, well, look, you can't not stress it enough. The team Quick Step was, that was. Like I said, that was teamwork 101. I mean, they had 2 in the top 3, 3 in the top 10. They had the race completely controlled. But compare and contrast to Sagan, who had Daniel Oss, his teammate, for a while. Then he got dropped. Then he's alone.
Yeah.
And when you're that big of a favorite, everybody's just going to look at you. But the move, I mean, Nicky Terpstra didn't win only because his team was that good. Keep in mind, Vincenzo Nibali, who just won Milan-San Remo, has won all 3 Grand Tours, has won Lombardia twice. I mean, this guy is one of the best of his generation. He attacked alone. Terpstra bridges up to him. They're together working. The next little, slight climb, he rides Nibali off his wheel. Nibali didn't sit up to go back and play a different deck. He wanted to be there. He rode him off his wheel. I mean, if you're a 6'1", 175-pound classics guy riding a 3-time, winner of the Tour of France, Tour of Spain, Tour of Italy off your wheel, that's some shit right there. That is amazing. And so from that point on,
it wasn't all tactics. It was some definite strength on his part.
It was all. I mean, he's got a V12.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a V12. He's won Paris-Roubaix. He won Heidelberg, a semi-classic last week. He's clearly on form. He puts for you fans at home, he puts everything on Strava. Obviously, every training ride. The win today in Tour of Flanders will be on his Strava account, which I just think is unbelievable. When he won Roubaix, he put it on Strava. That is so awesome.
It's very cool that he shows. I mean, okay, if you're a competitor, can you extract any data from? I've never gone deep on Strava. Is there a lot of information that could be helpful, or is it?
If you were maybe not. I mean, for these races, it's I don't think it's that advantageous to spy on your competitor's training, because there's these races, so much can happen tactically, mechanically.
And you could look at the data and not know exactly what was happening at that time.
You got to get in the race and see what happens. But for the big tours where things are a little, or not a little, they're way more calculated. Absolutely. I'd be, Chris Froome has started to put his training on Strava, but I would be surprised if any of these big guys did that leading up to the Tour de France. But hey, I mean, he did it. And just one more thing about him is, he was totally committed. When he got to Nibali, then dropped Nibali, then he was in no man's land.
Yeah, he didn't sit there for a long time.
But what he did have, was 3 teammates back in that group, which was 20 to 30 guys that they just kept covering everything. And it's so demoralizing if you're in that group and you don't have a teammate I think, but at that point, you're just sort of one and one and one. They had 3 guys. So they just neutralized, defended, neutralized.
And at one point, I know you're a fan of Peter Sagan. He tries to make the bridge, threw in the towel and went back to the group. I mean, was that tactical or was he just blowing up?
I think he realized that he wasn't going to make it across. Right.
And so I should sit in and sprint for third.
Yeah, but I'm sure
possibly second.
He got maybe second. He got 6th, but he put in a big effort when he was out there by himself. Peter Sagan doesn't care about getting 3rd in the Tour of Flanders.
Right.
No.
So let's talk about
second place loser.
What's it like for a guy like Sagan where...
By the way, the whole day, JB, we talked about this, and I got a text in the middle of the race from George Hincap. He said, Sagan he's not even breathing. For those of you who watched at home, I mean, on the climbs, I mean, it's not like we were just looking at him because you're seeing 50 guys go by. Everybody else is on the limit. He wasn't even breathing. I'm like,
he looks super chilled. In fact, they threw an expression on me that you had to explain. His fingers in the nose.
His fingers. He was just. You could have plugged his nose, his mouth. He was still
while everyone else is tongue out gasping.
Yeah, every orifice is breathing.
So my question is, what's it like career-wise, like a bigger picture for a guy like Sagan, where on any given day he could win, but his team doesn't have the strength of Quick Step? What does that mean? Like, does somebody like that want to be pulled into a bigger team? Is he happy where he is?
He came from a bigger team, and so it's look. Peter Sagan made the choice to go to the team that he's on, Bora Hansgrohe, for money. Which is what I'm not criticizing that. Every athlete does that. Mm-hmm. But when you do that, you also have to ask the question, okay, what is this team that I'm going to? How well can they support me? Whether it's trying to win Tour of Flanders or trying to win the green jersey. Because Peter Sagan can do a lot of things by himself, but he can't do everything by himself. And so without knowing, because I don't know total team budgets, I don't know what Bora Hansgrohe's total budget is. I don't know what Quick Step's total budget is. But having said that, Quick Step is a team that is focused on these races. They're not going to go win the Tour de France. They want to win spring classics. So even if their budgets were the same, they've used that money to hire and select riders that can win these races. Mm-hmm. So they'll be at the Tour of Spain in September. You won't even know they're in the race. But if they've won Flanders and maybe Roubaix and et cetera, Harelbeke last week. Their season is made. And so Sagan has to decide, right? If he wants the money and he gets the money and takes the money. He's tried to reinforce that team with some stronger guys. But you saw, when the race got 5.5 hours long or old or into it, and again, these races are 160 miles. They just weren't there. And so hard. You got to be really lucky to be alone and win against 4 guys from Quick Step.
But then there's also, it's kind of a catch-22 when you go to a team that isn't as strong, because do you make a decision to be the guy so there isn't a leader controversy at some point? Like, does that make sense? Like, you could go to a team that's stronger, but then you may end up with a leader controversy, which...
Well, you may, but he won't.
Oh, yeah, I know.
He will never have that. Well, he may have that problem at the end of his career, but he's not going to have that problem for a while.
But is that a decision that a lot of riders have to look at? I can go to this team that's not as strong as where I am now, but I'm going to be the guy.
Yeah, I guess. I can't imagine thinking that way, but maybe they do. One thing I do want to also point out is with regards to Quick Step, which is managed by Patrick Lefevre, who's been in cycling for a long, long time. So as a manager, this is his 11th, based on my math, I could be wrong. This is his 11th Tour of Flanders victory. So started in 1993 with Johan Museeuw and then went through all the years. This is number 11. That's pretty impressive.
And, on coverage and fan world, I don't know where you dig deep. You were inside of it, but we don't hear a lot about the managers. And I know you have some NASCAR friends, right? Mm-hmm. And they talk a lot about that. The fans of that sport, the team, the managers,
They talk about the crew chief.
the crew chief.
The crew chief is arguably.
But I don't think cycling does enough. I'd like to hear more of those tacticians.
It depends. It comes in waves, maybe, or just depends on the personality. I mean, in my run, I mean, a lot of people talked about Johan Brunel. I mean, he was the Bill Belichick of cycling at the time. If you go even before that, I mean, a guy like Cyril Guimard in France or Roger Liget, I mean, they were personalities as well. I mean, look, Dave Brailsford, right? Warts and all, love him or hate him, he's a major personality. And so Lefevre is, and I think he's changed because early on he was out front more. And he's been at it a long time. He's getting older, so he's stepped back a bit. But if you know enough about the sport, I mean, when Nicky Terpstra is just across the finish line and there's a total bum rush, which we can get into later because that thing is the dumbest thing in the world, that they got all these people and media and photographers. Dude, the guy just rode 160 miles. How about we get the fuck away? Give me some space. Let his wife in, let his teammates in, and let the manager in, which that's when you immediately saw Lefevre there. But the bum rush, he's like cramping and people,
I could, having watched obviously many finishes with you now, you get very frustrated. Like your blood pressure's elevating at the end of the race with the mob.
I know, and it does no good.
And then the same
That's
thing,
worthless.
like Higgins gets so frustrated too because he was probably the guy trying to help stiff arm those people at the end of many races.
It's not. It's been around. I'm just waiting. I'm just seeing if he's updated his Strava page with his.
Maybe it'll come in before we.
Well.
He's still getting
Higgs.
mobbed.
When did you check? I mean, my Strava. By the way, it loads so slow. I don't know what's wrong. But
explain this to me because I heard multiple comments today, and also you referenced it earlier on this show already. A Belgian team, a Dutch rider. I have no idea what those dynamics mean. I have no idea what, other than it's been a long time having a Dutch winner. I don't know what that means. I mean, is that like when a Canadian baseball team wins the World Series? Is it something like that?
Well, okay, it's a great question. I'm gonna take it a step farther, right? So you have two countries that border each other side by side, Belgium and Holland. You have a language. You basically have a shared language, right? So in Holland they speak Dutch. And in Belgium, they speak a dialect of Dutch called Flemish, right? And so, but they can communicate, they understand each other. It's communication's simple. But with like any state that's side by side or country that's side, there's a rivalry, right? And so whether it's a soccer match between the Belgian national team and the Dutch, that would be a massive match. That's way bigger than Belgium versus Switzerland. That's a snooze fest. I mean, in terms of intensity and emotion and passion, right? Or whatever. So you have this natural rivalry, which is, and I think Belgians by and large have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. I mean, Holland is a different place. A
little more glamorized, maybe.
Now
you're being careful.
Now I'm being very careful. I love you both, but I think they have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. But here's where it gets interesting, right? It's because not only did they not have a Belgian win, but even if Philippe Gilbert had won, he is from Gilbert, who got third from Quickstep. He is from Belgium. But he's from the French-speaking part of Belgium. So it gets even nastier, right? You've got maybe a Belgian and a Dutch rivalry, but within Belgium, you have Flanders and you have Wallonia. One speaks Flemish, the other speaks French, and then that's really intense.
Can't they just hug it out?
They're very, very different, man. I'm telling you. I mean, so Gilbert might have won, and there would have been plenty of people from Flanders like, oh, shit. Like, a Belgian, but that wouldn't have been a win for them.
Was it heated?
So it goes deeper and deeper.
When they signed Terpstra to the Belgian team, was that heated? Was that like a big thing?
No. They signed. I looked it up. They signed him. They signed him in 2011. So he's been there a long time.
People have accepted it.
It's interesting. They were talking about it on the Fubo coverage that there is talk that sometimes in the races he kind of rides his own race, meaning doesn't obey team orders, just sort of an individual, just goes rogue. he might have done that today, but here's the thing: like within that team, the one who does it first, that could have been Stibar, it could have been Gilbert, it could have been Terpstra. Whoever goes first, they get it, right? So the other guys, there's nothing they can do. If they're back in the main bunch, they have to say, all right, maybe I should have done that, but they probably couldn't have done it the way he did it, because when he went, it was like a motorcycle.
I want to leave with a Eddie Merckx quote that I learned today while we were watching, unless you have any final thoughts on today's race before we do that. I don't have any other thoughts. I thought, again, it was a super exciting race. I thought, just like Milan-San Remo to start the classic season, you had a winner who deserved to win. I mean, he didn't luck into this. Yeah. Nibali didn't luck into it. Very similar wins, in fact, where you have a rider that just said, look, I'm gonna make the race. I'm gonna make the race happen. And we'll see if it works, right? Those were, what Nibali did in Milan-San Remo was gutsy. What Terpstra did today was gutsy. So those are the guys that you want to win, right? Yeah. Nobody just said, okay, here you go. Yeah. And I mean, it was a classic power victory. And so you have more respect for a finish like that, it sounds like, as opposed to, let's duke it out.
I'd be fine with 15 guys sprinting and Peter Sagan winning. I'd be fine with that too. But, I love it too. I came from a team that really believed in teamwork and building a team around specific goals and running the tactics through and winning. And so that's what they did. So I can really appreciate that.
All right. Now share with us a quote from Merckx.
Eddie Merckx, old friend of mine, I've known a long time, highs and lows, et cetera, et cetera. He's won a lot of bike races. He won Milan-San Remo 7 times, Liège up to 1 million times, 5 tours, the world's a lot. And so the greatest quote that he ever said about the Tour of Flanders is like, oh my God, that race is so hard. I could only win it twice. I mean,
only twice.
I feel really bad for the cannibal. You only got 2 Flanders.
There you go. Next up on stages.
Next weekend.
Little preview.
Okay, so next weekend, again, to stay in this pattern of covering the Spring Classics, Paris-Roubaix next weekend, the Hell of the North. You thought the cobblestones were bad today? Just keep this in mind, people. You look at some of these things from today and realize that the cobbles are rough. Paris-Roubaix, I mean, the Ironburg Forest and these sections are so bad. I mean, they're 10 times rougher. Now, they're flat. The other interesting thing is I think they're calling for some rain. It's been a long time since we had a rainy Paris-Roubaix. That changes everything. And so I can't wait for that. And we'll hop right back on the air and cover it just like we did today.
I read enough children's books to know that the forest is usually bad. So we'll have that to look forward to.
That was a little creepy. Are you okay? Happy Easter, Bunny. Wow. Thanks for tuning in.